When Little House on the Prairie aired, millions fell in love with the perfect frontier couple, Charles and Caroline Ingalls. Michael Landon and Karen Grassle seemed to share a bond that was as pure and comforting as the show itself. But what if that beloved on-screen harmony was just a well-crafted illusion? After staying silent for decades, Karen Grassle has finally broken her silence, and what she reveals about her time working with Landon is as heartbreaking as it is shocking. Behind the scenes of America's most wholesome family drama was a reality far more painful, filled with power struggles, emotional manipulation, and moments that nearly drove her to walk away from it all. This is the truth she's held in for over 40 years, and it changes everything you thought you knew about Little House. From shocking mistreatment to unbearable tension on set, Karen Grassle is finally pulling back the curtain on what really happened behind the scenes of Little House on the Prairie, and it's nothing like the wholesome image fans grew up loving. The working relationship between Grassle and Michael Landon, once thought to be built on mutual respect and admiration, was far from the on-screen fairy tale. So what did Landon do that pushed Karen to the edge? And why did she remain silent for so long? What's about to be revealed could change the way you see one of America's most iconic TV shows forever. This is the side of Little House they never wanted you to see. For nearly a decade, Karen Grassle was the face of maternal strength and grace on American television. As Caroline Ingalls, she embodied the pioneer spirit, resilient, nurturing, and fiercely loyal. But before she became a household name, Grassle's journey began in the quiet corners of Northern California. Born in 1942, she moved with her family to Ventura at just 5 years old. Even in childhood, the spotlight called to her. She trained at a local dance academy, immersed herself in school plays, and fell in love with performance. After graduating from Ventura High School in 1959, her academic path led her to some of the most prestigious institutions in the country, places that would shape her into the artist she would one day become. Karen Grassle's path to stardom wasn't accidental, it was the result of relentless dedication and unmatched talent. She began her academic journey at H. Sophie Newcomb Memorial College, part of Tulane University, before transferring to the University of California, Berkeley, where she earned dual degrees in English and Dramatic Art in 1965. But Karen wasn't done chasing excellence. Her brilliance earned her a prestigious Fulbright Fellowship to the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, one of the world's top institutions for performance training. It was there, in London, that she transformed, from a gifted student into a commanding actress. Upon returning to the U.S., she threw herself into theater, performing lead roles at the Stanford Contemporary Workshop and the Colorado Shakespeare Festival. Her stage presence was undeniable. Her first professional job at the Front Street Theater in Memphis set her on a journey through the country's most respected resident and stock theaters. Eventually, she made her way to New York City, where she not only flourished on stage but also broke into television, appearing in PBS originals and landing roles in multiple network soap operas. Every step brought her closer to becoming the woman America would one day know as Caroline Ingalls. In 1968, she made her Broadway bow in The Gingham Dog, which was short but important. She then filled in for big names like Gloria Swanson, Rosemary Murphy, and Butterflies Are Free on Broadway. In 1972, she shared the stage with Marino Sullivan and Brandon Dew Wild at Denver's Elitch Theater. The sadness of Dew's death soon after the last show ruined the production. One of Grassle's most famous stage roles was in Cymbeline by Shakespeare in the Park, where she shared the stage with Christopher Walken, Sam W., and William Dean. It was clear that she could do a lot of different things, but her big break came when she tried out for the part of Caroline Less. People who watched TV didn't know much about her. But that changed very quickly. Karen got the part, and it would be the most important part of her career. Little House on the Prairie began in 1974 and ran for 9 seasons that everyone will remember. Millions of people loved her because of how she played Ma. The Grassland was where Grassle made her name on TV, but she didn't stop there. After filming the Little House pilot, she had a guest role on Gunsmoke in an episode called The Wing, where she played a saloon girl who got mixed up in a plan to kidnap someone. After that, she was in movies like Harry's War, where she played Kathy opposite Edward Herrmann, and Wyatt Earp opposite Kevin Costner. Grassle also played in and co-wrote the NBC TV movie Battered, a scary drama about real problems women face. She was also a strong advocate outside of acting. She fought for government funding for shelters, helped battered women, and actively pushed for the Equal Rights Amendment. She fought for women's rights with all her might and never gave up. She had a lot of TV credits outside of the planes. Cocaine, One Man Seduction, Crisis in Midair, and Between the Darkness and the Dawn are some of the TV shows she was in. She wrote that she was also a guest star on TV shows like Hotel, Love Boat, and Murder. She even went on old-school talk shows like Dina, The M.V. Griffin Show, and The Mike Douglas Show, where she charmed and warmed people up during the day. Karen Grassle went back to acting after Prairie Days was over. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, she helped start the Resource Theater Company. Later, she joined the Actors Company at the famous Actors Theater of Louisville in Kentucky. She moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in 2006 and has been in shows at the Aurora Theater, the Ride Down Mount Morgan Cabaret, Theater Works, and the San Francisco Playhouse. She played the title part in Driving Miss Daisy productions all across the country, from Manitoba to Virginia. In 2008, she won the Outstanding Achievement Award for her role in Cabaret. She even became the face of Premier Bathrooms, a company that sells goods that make bathrooms easier for older people to use. This showed that she could be graceful and relatable in commercials too. In 2021, Karen made a touching comeback in the movie Not to Forget, which was a strong drama about Alzheimer's disease. She was in movies with famous people like Cloris Leachman, Mann, Louis Gossett Jr., Tatum O'Neal, Olympia Dukakis, and George Chakiris. Karen Grassle has been a force through it all. She is a professionally trained actress, a TV star, and a fierce supporter of women. There is more to her story than just how she made it from the stages of London to the fields of America. This is a story about bravery, strength, and ability that lasts forever. How did Karen Grassle get the part that made her famous? Karen Grassle was thrilled when she got the chance to try out for the part of Caroline Less, who she respectfully calls Ma. She couldn't believe she might soon be on screen with Michael Landon, the heartthrob who is best known for playing the charming Joe Cartwright on the hit TV show Bonanza. It seemed like a dream chance for Grassle, but it turned into a nightmare behind the scenes that left her mentally scarred and disappointed. After NBC decided to keep airing Little House on the Prairie, Michael Landon, who was also the show's chief producer, writer, and director, was in charge of all the casting. 47 women tried out for the part of Caroline Less in the search for his perfect mother. His Shaw parody was one of the best candidates, and she would later join the show in a different part. But Landon picked Grassle in the end because he thought she looked like a pioneer woman. Karen Grassle didn't have much experience in movies or TV at the time. She had learned a lot about theater at the college level and had a degree in dramatic arts, but she didn't have many movie awards. Landon seemed to not care about that because he chose players like Catherine McGregor and Richard Bull who had strong theater backgrounds and little Hollywood baggage. However, getting the right kids was the hardest part of the casting process. Landon did not want his girls to have stage mothers who were professionals. He wanted the truth. Melissa Sue Anderson was chosen to play Mary, and Melissa Gilbert was cast as Laura. On set, they were called Missy and Half Pint. And because of rules against child labor, Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush, who are identical twins, played little Carrie. The group looked wonderful. But those smiles from the planes didn't mean everything was as good as it seemed. The conflict between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle that doesn't show on screen. The relationship between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle was very different from how they played the perfect pair on Little House on the Prairie. Tensions were building up under the Frontier's warm charm, caused by pay disputes, power imbalances, and behavior that Grassle would later call degrading. In the beginning of the show, Grassle was thrilled to work with Landon. People already knew him from his long-running part as the sweet little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza. But what started out as exciting turned into something very scary very quickly. As Little House became more famous, Grassle felt that her work wasn't being properly acknowledged. She asked for a raise before the second season started, sure that she had earned it. But she later said that Landon turned down her request, saying that her character wasn't very famous and that her pay should reflect that by comparing her worth to that of the younger cast members. The mood changed after this argument. Grassle said that Landon started cutting her out of important stories, acting like she didn't exist, and treating her like she was. She was picked on set. Insulting words and cold behavior made her less welcome. Being Ma, her dream part, was wearing her down emotionally, casting a long shadow over what should have been a turning point in her career. But what Grassle went through wasn't the only hard thing going on behind the scenes. The period-correct outfits looked real, but they were very hard to film in. The women in the group were wrapped in layers. Pants, boots, tights, and long dresses with eye hooks up the back. Even though they were filming in California's relentless sun. The show was shot in Simi Valley, where summer temperatures often went over 100 degrees and often went over 80 degrees. Speaking about her first day on set, Allison Argrim, who played the deliciously evil Nellie Olson, said that it was over 100 degrees, and that didn't even count the hot lights that were used. She felt dizzy almost right away because she hadn't eaten breakfast. She remembered getting dizzy while putting up a scene, but she didn't say anything because she was afraid someone would think she wasn't strong enough for the job. As the day went on, she got so weak that she spoke like she was in a hospital bed at times. She had trouble seeing, and then everything went dark. She was revived on set by a doctor, and even though it was scary, she finished the day's shoot. She went on to become one of the most famous bad guys on TV at the time. She wrote that the heat and the heavy wardrobe were the real bad guys. On the other hand, Michael Landon wasn't just playing. He also wrote, produced, and directed a lot of Little House. From his time on Bonanza, he brought over ideas and even whole plays. It was strange how some episodes of Little House had a lot in common with older episodes of Bonanza. The plots, dialogue, and even camera views were all the same. An episode of Bonanza from 1970 called A Matter of Circumstance was one of the most striking examples. In it, Little Joe is kicked by a horse and left home alone. He tries to cut off his own hand to avoid getting an infection, but passes out before he can finish. 6 years later, in Little House on the Prairie episode, A Matter of Faith, Caroline hurts her leg while she's home by herself and almost cuts it off before passing out. B.W. Sander wrote both shows, and William Claxton directed them. They were also alike in other ways. The Little House story, Someone Please Love Me, was based on the Bonanza episode, A Dream to Dream. He was only 7 years old when the sad Little House episode was based on him. These creative similarities may have saved Landon time in the writing room, but they also showed how often he reuses old material. It hurt so much that even the cast's hair hurt. At first, Allison Argrim's hair was in Nellie Olson's style, with big curls. Every night she slept with her hair in curlers, and she got to work as early as 4:30 a.m. to deal with the curling irons that were needed to make her look perfect. The costume department finally made her a wig that fit perfectly, but the process was painful in its own way. There were a lot of bobby pins and a metal comb used to hold the wig in place during long shoot days and the rare fight on set. As Argrim wrote, there was never a time when it felt good. When things were really bad, the pins dug into her head and sometimes left little cuts. There were little spots of blood on her fingers when she rubbed her head. The on-set hairdresser would then rush over and use Siebes astringent to clean her wounds before shooting could continue. Ed Friendly, one of the show's original directors, says that the Engels family was living a little too well behind the scenes. On screen, they may have had a hard time with crop failures, poverty, and harsh winters. Friendly and Landon co-created the show. Friendly later told People magazine that the production had become too different from Laura Ingalls Wilder's books. In his own words, the Engels family had been softened and polished for network appeal. One change that worried him was that the kids wore shoes. Friendly thought this took away from the show's goal of showing how hard life was on the frontier. Another network executive apparently didn't like the idea of the family living in a sod house because it was too sad, so they were quickly moved to a frame house. Friendly got angry and said that the show's name should be How Affluent Is My Prairie, making fun of the fact that the Engels had everything but a Cadillac. In the end, Friendly quit the show before it aired. Little House on the Prairie became a cultural phenomenon without him. Even though there was a lot of stress behind the scenes, it was very hot, and the plots were used over and over again. But for the cast, especially Karen Grassle, it wasn't nearly as heartwarming as it seemed on screen. Behind the camera life was very different from the simple joys of Walnut Grove. Fans saw a good family drama about love, resilience, and frontier values. What they didn't see was the physical, emotional, and professional cost that some actors quietly paid to make that dream come true. But Karen Grassle had problems in her personal life too. By 2021, Karen Grassle had been a beloved figure in American television history for decades. But when she published her memoir, Bright Lights Prairie Dust, Reflections on Life, Loss, and Love from Little House's Ma, readers quickly realized there was a lot more to Caroline less than they had thought. The book was deeply personal, and it hurt. It was more than just a look behind the scenes at Little House on the Prairie. It was a story of struggle, heartbreak, and victory over a lifetime. Grassle had been writing in journals since she was 13 years old, trying to make sense of her life with an alcoholic father. This was the start of a memoir that would include everything, even her own battle with addiction. She wrote about her complicated relationship with Michael Landon, her co-star and boss. But what may have been most striking was how honest she was about the problems she faced behind closed doors after the cameras stopped rolling. In 1977, everything changed. She set up a lunch for the cast and gave herself a glass of wine, the only time she ever drank at work. But when she got back to the set, she couldn't stop thinking about the wine. She went outside, splashed water on her face, rinsed her mouth out with mouthwash, and smoked a cigarette, but nothing helped. She knew something was wrong. A week later, she went to a feminist conference and had to give a speech. She was nervous, so she drank a little too much before the speech. It went on too long, and she felt embarrassed. Afterward, she went to see an old friend who had just finished Alcoholics Anonymous. The friend told her straight out what was going on. Karen finally realized she had a problem and couldn't deny it. When she got home, she tried to quit drinking but failed. One more drunk night, one more ruined conversation, and one more round of tears. Then she made up her mind, she would never drink again. She got help and stayed sober. A few months later, her father, who had been an example of addiction to her, died of alcoholism. She didn't need a reminder. She knew that this disease would kill her, so she chose to stay clean, clear-eyed, and determined to get her voice back. But while she was getting stronger in recovery, another silent battle was waiting for her. This time, it wasn't in a bottle, it was on set. Karen Grassle finally talks about what Michael Landon did to her. After a long career in theater, Karen Grassle was nervous when she first walked onto the set of the Little House on the Prairie pilot. She had never worked in TV before, but Michael Landon made her feel welcome. She remembered him as being very kind and sensitive in those early days. He directed with care, offered her support, and gave her time to find her feet. It felt like the start of something magical at first, but it didn't last. Grassle finally told fans what really happened behind the scenes almost 40 years after the beloved show stopped, and many were shocked by what she said. The world saw Charles and Caroline less as a loving frontier couple. Off-screen, Grassle and Landon were not at all happy. She revealed that Landon could be very mean. In her autobiography, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, Grassle wrote about how much worse things were behind the scenes than fans ever imagined. She talked about the gross jokes Landon told in front of the cast and crew. He made fun of her looks and facial expressions and told her she didn't deserve more pay than the child actors because the show had only started in 1974. Even at the height of her fame, Grassle was paid between $2,000 and $4,000 per week, and Landon shut it down when she asked for a raise before the second season. He reportedly told her that she wasn't as popular as she thought she was and that her pay should reflect that. Grassle said she felt insulted. As a co-star on a hit show, she wasn't trying to make unreasonable demands, she just wanted fair pay. After that, things changed. She saw her scenes being cut and her role in the story decreasing. When Landon wasn't ignoring her, he was making fun of her behind her back. He would make fun of her body and facial expressions in front of other crew members. Grassle remembers feeling paralyzed because she couldn't talk to him directly. She felt like she was frozen. But as a woman who worked in TV in the 1970s, she was used to these kinds of put-downs, so it never occurred to her to fight back strongly. Instead, she kept her head down, stayed professional, and played the part of the good girl, hoping things would get better. But Landon's rudeness didn't stop there. He could use very bad language on set. Grassle remembered him calling women names like C***T and making rude jokes about their bodies. She said that the worst of it happened during their private one-on-one scenes, the sweet bedroom talks that fans loved. She loved filming the scenes where they would flirt quietly while talking about their latest problems, but over time, she couldn't stand those scenes anymore. Landon started making crude jokes while they were lying in bed, with several men standing around them and the room being very bright. Grassle gave a very detailed account of what happened. She said she felt trapped, with no way out of that small bed in that overly bright room, with men standing all around her. It was embarrassing. Even though it was hard, the two were able to get back together in the years after the show ended. Grassle talked about how thankful she was that their relationship ended on a better note before Landon's death in 1991. Over the years, many of Landon's co-stars and collaborators have paid tribute to him, often calling him warm, funny, and deeply caring. But Grassle's revelations added a new layer to the story. Another person who didn't like him was Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingalls. She wrote about her own feelings about him in her memoir, The Way I See It, a look back at my life on Little House. Anderson said that Landon was a good dad based on what she saw, but he was bossy at work. He was mean and would pick on certain people to tease them in public and over again. She also said something shocking about the series finale, when Landon blew up the whole town of Walnut Grove. Anderson said Landon wasn't just trying to make a dramatic ending, he wanted revenge and didn't want anyone else to use the sets after the show ended. The stories from behind the scenes of Little House on the Prairie paint a much more complicated picture. They show creative genius, high pressure, quiet pain, and what it cost to keep the peace in a time when speaking up didn't always feel like a choice. It was common for Michael Landon to be hard to work with. He is remembered as a talented actor, writer, director, and producer, and he is still loved by many fans and even many cast members. But his legacy is much more complicated than his on-screen persona suggests. Landon had a reputation for being hard to work with, emotionally unstable, and especially degrading toward women. When Karen Grassle finally spoke out, she wasn't alone. Many people were shocked by her story, which echoed what others had been going through quietly for years. She wasn't the first person to speak out, and it's likely she won't be the last. After Grassle's book, Allison R. Grimm, who played the notoriously evil Nellie Oleson, told the truth about her experience with Landon, adding to Grassle's claims and giving them new depth. At an event honoring Bob Hope and U.S. veterans, R. Grimm said Landon was more angry, bad, and dangerous to know than the good farmer he played. She said he smoked, drank, told bad jokes, and supported a work culture that was similar to Mad Men's male-dominated, whiskey-fueled vibe. She compared the set to an old boys' club where jokes were not only accepted, but encouraged. R. Grimm remembered that Landon drove a Ferrari, smoked a lot, and rarely slept. He seemed to be fueled by creative energy all the time. She said that his level of drive, working at full throttle 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, could wear others down. The set had its problems, but she said that disagreements were often left at the door of the makeup room, which she called a demilitarized zone, where cast members could calm down before going on set. Even though things were crazy, R. Grimm said she liked Landon's crazy energy. As a teenager, she thought his crazy behavior was funny. She didn't have any problems with him and thought he was a wonderful, crazy man who was never boring. It interested her that he played a poor prairie farmer on screen but drove a Ferrari in real life, got married 3 times, and lived anything but simply. Argrim's story didn't match Grassle's pain, but it did fit the bigger picture. People loved Pa Engels, but he was actually complicated, flawed, and often careless with his power. Behind the scenes, he was so powerful that no one dared to stand up to him. Even people who were mistreated, like Grassle, kept quiet for decades, because of the way power worked in the industry and the fact that women's silence was seen as normal at the time. Grassle's revelations, on the other hand, have brought to light uncomfortable truths that had been buried under nostalgia for a long time. Her memoir doesn't try to destroy Landon's legacy, instead, it aims to complicate it and show what happens when brilliance isn't checked by empathy or humility. It takes away the perfect surface and asks fans to think about the people behind the characters. After writing her best-selling book, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated, Argrim said that even though there was a lot of dysfunction on the show, it always brought everyone back together. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, they were like a family again. Many people remember Little House on the Prairie as a sweet and innocent American show. But for some of the actors, the truth is more complicated. Behind the warmth and the prairie sunsets, there were power struggles, painful silences, and moments that still hurt decades later. How Michael Landon's creativity brought about problems. Before Little Residence on the Prairie grew to become Michael Landon into America's most beloved frontier father, he had already carved out a call for himself because the charismatic Little Joe on Bonanza. Both shows became iconic, synonymous with own family values, grit, and AA2EAT4E17954BKX0423CB2 Americana. However, behind the scenes, things were hardly ever as healthful. If Little Residence found out Landon as a perfectionist powerhouse with a controlling streak, Bonanza became wherein that hearth first ignited. It was on the Ponderosa Ranch that Landon honed his craft and clashed with colleagues. Long before he turned into writing scripts and directing episodes on his personal terms, he became ruffling feathers, but additionally evolving from a warm-headed heartthrob into a person decided to govern the narrative, each on screen and off. There's seemingly no shortage of on-set feuds in Hollywood. And whilst it's no surprise that no longer everybody goes to get along, some in the back of the scenes tensions spiral into full-blown rivalries which can sour a whole manufacturing. For the solid, it creates a poisonous running surroundings. For the target market, it turns into impossible to watch the show the same manner again. The drama off-screen can become larger than anything going on within the script, and in some cases, it even overshadows the legacy of the display itself. One of the long-strung Western dramas in TV history, Bonanza aired from 1959 to 1973, handing over 14 seasons of classic frontier storytelling. It became a landmark in American TV, a show that allowed audiences to grow along its characters and cast. Over the years, the specialists at the back of Bonanza became masters of their craft, refining their performances, deepening their storytelling, and organizing something that felt actual. That form of longevity does not just happen. It needs dedication, consistency, and a thick pores and skin. At the center of it all become Michael Landon, solid as Little Joe Cartwright. Younger, captivating, and warm-headed, Little Joe became a fan favorite from the beginning. And the parallels among the character and the man gambling him weren't misplaced on the ones backstage. Landon introduced with him an uncooked power, one that would light up a scene or ignite tensions in a heartbeat. In Conversations with Michael Landon, Tom Ito painted Little Joe as rebellious, describing him as hot-tempered and high-lively, tendencies that reflected Landon's very own personality for the duration of his early years at the display. Behind the camera, Landon had what Ito called a defiantly active persona. That depth, even as charming on display screen, on occasion created friction on set. One supply of that tension became director William Claxton. In keeping with the e-book, Claxton once seemed in a televised interview and failed to mince words. He described Landon's mindset within the early years as pugnacious, even regarding the actor as a brat. The one's initial seasons of Bonanza were not constantly smooth cruising. And Claxton recalled a young actor whose passion frequently clashed with authority. But like every long-going for Walk series, time had its effect, now not simply at the characters, but on the people behind them. Claxton also mentioned that Landon modified. As he matured, his stressed strength observed new cause. What started as sheer pressure of will transformed into artistic obsession. Landon became keen on the technical and creative elements of television. Writing, directing, producing. He desired to do all of it, and eventually he did. It became this innovative force that fashioned the second one-act of Landon's profession. Folks that watched him on Bonanza noticed more than simply an actor evolve. They saw a man begin to take manage of his destiny. The shift failed to just adjust his status on the show. It shifted how he related to others. Where once there were friction, there was now attention. Instead of preventing the device, he was building it. By the time Little House at the Prairie arrived, Landon wasn't only a lead actor. He changed into a writer. His time on Bonanza had taught him a way to lead a hard and fast, the way to craft a tale, and the way to shape the imaginative and prescient of a display. But it had also created a complicated guy. At the same time as some praised his genius and painting's ethic, others found his leadership style controlling, even domineering. That complexity followed him into his subsequent projects on Little Residence. Co-stars like Karen Grassle and Allison Argrim could later display just how turbulent things ought to get. For a few, Landon turned into a first-rate mentor. For others, he became impossible to paintings with, however none ought to deny his talent or his evolution. In a manner, Landon's tale mirrored the arc of a television person. Delivered as a firecracker of younger air of mystery, tough around the edges, he grew into a person obsessed on storytelling and perfection. He could be heat and magnetic or icy and exacting. He became a contradiction, a man who should make audiences cry on display at the same time as creating tension off-screen. What remains undeniable is that Bonanza fashioned Michael Landon just as Landon helped shape Bonanza. The actor grew up on that set, matured inside its scripts, and used its instructions to catapult himself into a wholly new creative section. The show gave him his start, but it also examined each a part of who he became. And just like the display that made him well known, Landon's legacy is layered, complex, and deeply human. What do you think about Michael Landon? Share your thoughts with us within the comments underneath. Take into account to love, percentage, and subscribe, and click the following video proven for your display screen.